Hi, welcome to Outlaw Bookstore with me, Stephen E. Andrews, and today it's an unboxing of Norfolk Coast on vinyl. Yeah, it's not in the box, I've taken it out of the box, but that's always really boring. It's still in the shrink wrap though. Look at that. How long have we waited? Since 2004, it's 19 years and it's finally out there, limited edition vinyl. This is number 397, and I'm still angry about the fact that you can't walk into a shop. Actually, recently you can walk in, you can find Feline. You can't walk in and you can't buy Radish, you can't buy No More Heroes of Black and White. These were massive bestsellers throughout the 77 and 78. They set the tenor for punk rock and everything else. Never mind what John Savage or anybody else says, as good as those people are. The Stranglers were the band who sold more than all the other punk bands put together, and to me they were punk rock, so I'm sticking with that theory. Anyway, here we have it. Let's have a look at it. And yeah, it's hard to believe how long it's been, the first ever edition, so it's really exciting. It's not like, you know, we've had some nice re-releases in recent years, but to have Norfolk Coast is really special, isn't it? And I remember the first time I heard the song Norfolk Coast. J.J. Bernal was doing a solo acoustic tour, his first ever solo tour. And this was 2001, I think. And I went to see him on the opening night. It was at Swindon Arts Centre, of all places. And it was a great gig because JJ's, you know, he's a good guitar player. And it was just him and an acoustic, and we were sitting in the front. It was a seated gig. Me and the video widow, my partner, we were right at the front. And it was excellent. And JJ actually played Norfolk Coast that night. So that was the first time it was ever played in public. And he also did an instrumental called Frogs Crossing Roads, which I don't think has ever been recorded, certainly not released. And that was a typical sort of Greenfield and Bernal waltz time sort of thing. And that was good as well. And I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Those are the two unreleased tracks I remember. And he also played a cover version of Quark, Stranglers and Charm by Hawkwind, another of my favourite bands, which was great because I didn't know then, and I don't think anybody knew then, that JJ was a fan. I had talked briefly to Hugh Cornwell back in 1986, one night in Bath, when Hugh and I had a drink in a club called Moles, and One in a Million had come out relatively recently before that, and we were talking about that, and he said, oh, what else do you like? And I said, I like Hawkwind a lot, and David Bowie and various other things. But anyway, look at that. And there's the guys, and it's interesting because the figures of the chaps are all shiny. It looks like they've been sort of tacked on there, and it's not the most flattering sort of portrait of Dave Greenfield in particular, but how we miss Dave. He's such a nice guy, my idol. You know, it's really, really sad that he's no longer with us. And Jet as well there in the background. What a pity. And there was a lot of excitement about this album. I'm sure I was very excited about it, and we were looking forward to it because John Ellis had gone and Baz was on board. And Baz's first recorded appearance with the band was on 5 Live 01, wasn't it? And interestingly, I met Baz and talked to Baz before I ever saw him play with the band, because what happened at that Bernal gig in 2001, after it was over, I took my ticket and wrote a message on the back, put my phone number on, and I left it on JJ's monitor or on his amp, because it's a small venue and you could do things like that. And basically I left a message saying, look, I'm writing this book, which I think you'd be interested in. It's a book I've never finished. It's 80% finished. It's on my hard drive. And I went on and did other things in my literary career. And I said, you know, you'd be interested in this. And he emailed me and rang me up, and we agreed to meet. And we met at Tucker's Grave Inn. Look at that. Isn't that fantastic? It's sort of like a bluey green. Really, really nice. Lovely. Really works for the tenure of the album. That really works for the style of the album, doesn't it? Beautiful. And anyway, he said, oh, you know, you've pitched this book idea really well, because my idea was to try and get him to write the foreword. And so he said, well, I'm down that way, we'll meet up. And he invited me out to meet him at Tucker's Grave Inn, which of course has a relevance to this, as we'll talk about in a moment. And I went up there after work, and wow, you get this really nice insert. And I used to run a university bookshop then. And after work, my partner drove me out to Tucker's Grave Inn, which is way out in the countryside. It's sort of in between Frome and Bath. And basically, I was there for a little while on my own. So I went straight after work. And then JJ, Dave and Baz came in. And it was just great. And I'd met JJ and Dave before when I was very young. When I was 16, I met the entire band at a signing they did in Cardiff in Spillers for the gig they did at Top Rank. That was October the 30th or 31st. I think it was October the 31st, 79. And that was the night where Hugh got busted and ended up in Pentonville. It was a storming gig. It was the whole Raven thing. So look at that. You got a really nice insert there. It's a good picture and it's a different background there as well. And fundamentally, what happened was that I got to talk to the guys and I talked about music and it was just really good. I talked to JJ and Dave and Baz and, you know, I said, this is the new boy. It was quite cheeky of me, but he was a really charming guy, you know, he's a lovely guy. And I talked about the book and they took the extant manuscript, which is only a little bit finished then. It hadn't got to the point where it was anywhere near finished and hadn't got to the point where it would mention the Stranglers, because it was a chronological thing about a certain period in rock music. And fundamentally, I know Jet read it, but I sort of sat there with the guys and we sank a load of pints. And Tucker's Grave Inn, if you're not familiar with it, if you're not familiar with its mythology, it's a sort of rough cider pub and they brew on site. And you could get bar snacks there, but you can't actually get food there. So I got really, really drunk. And while the guys went off to have dinner, which Jet was cooking, I stayed in the pub and talked to the locals. And it was the day Douglas Adams died. So you can look it up from that. It's the day Douglas Adams died. And they came back and we had a great chat. And Sil Wilcox was there as well. And Sil I'd talked to before because he's from Bath and around Bath. And we'd spoken before, we'd sort of paths had crossed. And we had a really good night. And I sat there, particularly with Dave, who was my idol. It was just lovely. And he's such an ordinary, self-effacing guy. And JJ, you know, John, I feel something deep in my soul for him. He's got sort of dark, brooding, Eurocentric soul, rather like me in my serious moments, I always think. And I just loved it. And this is a great record, isn't it? So anyway, that's how I got to chat with the chaps. Now I met Baz. And Baz moved to Frome. And for quite a few years, he was living in Frome. And he'd come and play in the pubs in Bath. There was one particular, and it was free. You'd go in and he'd get paid in a case of beer. And we'd always talk. And he'd crack me one of the beers and give me one to take home and stuff and that. I used to see him. And one night we bumped into each other after we'd both seen Magazine at a venue in Bath. And that was the second tour that Magazine did when they reformed. When Barry Adamson had left at that point, which was a shame. And we had a chat about that. Really nice guy, you know, lovely guy. But anyway, back to Norfolk Coast. Enough of my reminiscences, which I'm sure you're bored with. I know a lot of you met the band as well and had great experiences. But isn't it just beautiful to see it? Something I should add here that I almost forgot is that there's a new book out by Andrew Lauder, who was the A&R guy at United Artists Records. And of course, he signed the Stranglers. And he's very famous throughout the 70s particularly. He signed all sorts of great bands out the UA. Hawkwind, Man, Buzzcocks, Stranglers, lots of other great stuff as well. And I was reading that in work yesterday. Unfortunately, a lot of the stories that I know, but if you're not aware of Andrew Lauder and his importance in alternative rock in the 70s in Britain, give it a read. I'll flash a picture up on the screen in a minute. So that's an interesting one. And there is a chapter which is mostly about the Stranglers. It's a proper chronological narrative. So they pop up a couple of times. But he talks about how he could speak to them and he couldn't talk to the Sex Pistols, and that's why, you know, he sort of signed them and he made the right decision. And it's nothing that you won't already know, but Lauder's an interesting guy, curated lots of great music, so do check that out as well. First released in 2004, this release 2023, marvellous. So what do we think of it as the album? It's got nice inner sleeve, as you see, coloured vinyl, and I have to say, for me, this has always been an album which the things I like on it, I think, are absolutely amazing. There's 4 or 5 tracks I think are amazing. I mean, Norfolk Coast, I think, is brilliant. Long Black Veil, which was mostly written by Baz, I believe. Baz used to play this at his solo sets in these pubs of Bath. He always used to play that one and sing it beautifully, really good. And of course, Long Black Veil is a country song. It's the title of a country song as well. Johnny Cash. When I first came across that title, I thought, oh, it's a shame they're using somebody else's title, because I always like the band to be original. They always were original, but it worked really well. It's a great number. Dutch Moon, which is, to me, is classic acoustic Stranglers. That wonderful guitar line, that beautiful solo, you know, equal of Hugh Cornwell, you know, and I don't often say that, but Baz really did a great job on that. Lovely song. And another favourite for me is Tucker's Grave, which of course has special meaning. And Tucker's Grave Inn is called that because somebody, I'm not sure what the folklore is now, I used to know but I can't remember, and I haven't swatted it up, so do forgive me, but somebody hanged themselves at Tucker's Grave, and I think they were a criminal, and I think their name was Tucker, so there you go. So it's that's in the lyrics: committed a crime which no longer exists, left at the crossroads and replaced it as jinx, because of course they would bury people at crossroads, because when they rose from the dead, they wouldn't know what way to go. And the devil used to hang around at crossroads, the old Robert Johnson blues legend and stuff. So, yeah, and so those four particularly really did it for me. The rest of the album, I've always struggled with, I'll be quite honest. And I think, I mean, Norfolk Coast is one of those songs where we can, anybody who's ever sort of had like a love affair and has been, you know, done down will relate to that, to the bitterness and the angst. And I like the way that the song admits that this person has hurt JJ on the narrator, and that it's just driving him absolutely mad, and there's nothing you can do about it. And I think one of my favourite parts of it is when Paul sings at the end. He sings, and the screams of the birds. That sort of bit is just fantastic. It's just so good. And, you know, I like Paul singing a lot. I just didn't like the idea of the Stranglers with a lead singer. It never worked for me. They had 3 lead singers as far as I was concerned. You know, Hugh, Dave and JJ. So, yeah, that's really beautiful. But a wonderful song. And it's got that great savage bass intro, which reminds us of classic things like Toddler on the Sea. But yeah, absolutely great track, and so full of angst and that dark, doomy romanticism, which only Burnell can do, and just beautiful. Long Black Veil, again, I mean, I think, as I say, I'm sure Baz wrote this, and that whole thing of, you know, being in trance with somebody and saw my love trample deep in the dirt, overwhelmed by the bitterest hurt. You know, it's really good rhyming couplets and things, and frightened of the things he might find, you know. It's just a brilliant song, you know, absolutely great. That sort of middle 8 thing, and oh, you know, spent many hours just looking at you, and the way that, again, things have turned sour and fallen apart is just beautifully expressed. And this is what one of the things the Stranglers are really good at. You know, their love songs are not like other people's love songs, you know, Princess of the Streets, things like that. They're full of the reality and the conflicted feelings that you have in these situations and things where, you know, the feeling is there, but at the same time you're angry, you know, and that's why I think they appeal so much to men and to women. You know, we've all had these feelings. And Dutch Moon, again, I think is very, you know, it's some beautiful, you know, beautiful stuff. And it's sort of, it's very romantic. You want to see the thing where you're involved with somebody and you have dates and you go somewhere beautiful. Dutch Moon obviously implies that. And the bit where towards the end where he says, in an instant you're a firebrand, that relates to me to Long Black Veil and Norfolk Coast. It's that feeling. There's always that thing. Nothing is ever pure with the Stranglers. Everything is always tainted with a tincture of reality, and that's where the songwriting is so good. I have to say, the other songs have never done it for me in the same way. I really didn't like Big Thing Coming when it came out as a single before, even though it charted and did really well, and it was the first chart single for a long time for the band. And I could appreciate the sentiment, but I didn't really think it was that great a song. So sorry if you like it, but there you go. And things like I've Been Wild and Lost Control always seem too obvious to me. Sad for Cuss is good because that was an interesting one. Lyrics in different languages, the whole Eurocentric thing that JJ was big on, which I absolutely love. And I thought that was great. And of course, there's the violin. And it was nice to see Dave playing guitar on that as well. So yeah, so even though over half the album doesn't do it for me in a big way, I am looking forward to, I think I'm going to play it again and revisit some of those tracks, because it's been a while. Because with a CD, you notice that you tend to skip to your favourites when you don't think an album is fully spot on. But it is a classic because of those 4 songs, I think. And as you see, it's got particularly specific memories for me. So I'm just going to curate it in my usual style. I've got a polylined inner in black, of course. How can we have any other colour? Slip that in there, and that can keep the inner sleeve nice and pristine. Pop it into here. So yeah, so despite my misgivings about some tracks, I'm really pumped to have this, and I'm sure you guys are as well, because we've waited a very long time, haven't we? You know, some of us have grown old waiting for it, tragically, that's the thing. So, but you know, if you're going to grow old with something great, why not grow old with the Stranglers? What is there better? You know, relentless time is the reality, isn't it? We all have to live with it and take it and what have you. So we'll get the insert in, which is nice, as I say. So yeah, so hopefully next we'll see a reissue of Giants, because you had to be pretty quick to get Giants on vinyl. And I'll be quite honest, I just didn't manage it at the time, and so I really need Giants to come now, and that comes when there's some sort of appropriate anniversary. And yeah, it looks very beautiful, doesn't it? Very moody, very North Winds. You know, I always think of North Winds as well, that wonderful romantic track from Oral Sculpture, the most Eurocentric, the hardest, the most bitter, and my favourite track from that album by far. You know, I do love JJ's sort of dark Eurocentric soul, and yeah, and it's a great shame to think, you know, that Jet and Dave are no longer with us. You know, they crafted such wonderful stuff. But I must say, even though I don't go and see the band live anymore, I've watched videos people have put up and seen Toby play, and Toby's fantastic, isn't he? He's really good. I had heard him with Rialto, but he's really excellent. So, you know, it's better than working for a living. You know, if you're getting out there and going to gigs and doing gigs, there we are. So that's Norfolk Coast, limited edition, coloured vinyl. Great. We have it at last. Bye for now.